Today, we're looking at Krishna's Writer's Night. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. There's timestamps down below so that if you are only interested in certain parts, you can skip around. But if you've got the time, please check out the entire video. Also, you can follow me over on Instagram. And if you like fountain pen ink reviews, I would invite you to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then inked up this Pilot Metropolitan with a 1.0 stub nib, wrote with it for a day, and used it to take the notes for this video. In order to have some standardization in my writing samples, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I do test other papers, but those will show up later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in bottle form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. That little bit, that's transfer from me. That was me being sloppy, not the paper having some sort of malfunction. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and it seems like the KR is a little bit darker than the N, and the beginning of the A is a little bit lighter than the end of the A. So it looks like there's the tiniest bit of shading there, but not really shading. Now the extra fine is about the same tone that we got with the 1.1. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and it does have shading. It has quite a bit of shading. When you look at the word quick, it starts light and it gets itself very dark. Brown starts dark and gets light. Over starts very light and becomes very dark. The word the, very dark. This is some of the only real shading that we're going to get lots of in it. 11 seconds to dry. The medium is significantly darker than the extra fine and a little bit darker than the 1.1. The medium has no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade, 14 seconds to dry. The scrubby for the extra fine, if you're looking far left to far right, you see some color variation, and we do get that up here. The medium shows none, and we got none. Tomoe River. Tomoe River has no bleeding. It has normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is slightly darker a tone than we got with the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shading, 15 seconds to dry. The medium is a little bit darker than we get with the extra fines. We get 3 slightly different tones depending on the nib and flow of the pen. The medium has no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade, 21 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't expect it and we didn't get it. Rhodia, no bleeding. That's not bleed spots. That's me. I'm sloppy. No ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is right on the same tone as the 1.1. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo sheen, or shade, 12 seconds to dry, but the medium is significantly darker than the 1.1, with no feather, spread, halo sheen, and no shade, 16 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both show us no color variation, and we didn't get any kind of color variation. And that's it for this part of the writing sample. I agree with Vita that we learn a lot when we do multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this really undercoating of light purple that pushes its way up, and we really see the blue across the top mixing in with that purple. So while I call this a blue ink, it definitely has a lot of purpley about it. It just is a hint, and it doesn't come through in all of the writing. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. We see the line across the bottom is much more there, and we see some of the purple and some of the blues in that line across the bottom. Now that light purple pushes its way up, and then we get that nice bright blue across the top. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before I test it. Looking at the highlighter, we do see that it spreads just a little bit. We do see that there's some blurriness that starts to occur with the G and the H. However, there's nothing that makes me feel that I couldn't use this in a note-taking situation, that I might lose something important. I don't think so. I feel kind of safe. Now, before we get to the water, I want to point out that we do see sheen. If we can get the camera to hold focus. We do see sheen in this ink, but it doesn't come through in any of the writing. Water is lifting only some of the darkest tones. It's really not doing a lot to disrupt this ink. There's a lot left behind. I don't think water is going to do it for you. Now, pen flush does everything water does and a bit more, but most important, I start to see the white of the paper coming through, which is a relief for me, because that means that given a little bit more time and some patience, pen flush can be able to remove this from your pen, and you don't have to go to the 1/3 bleach solution. Although if you did, the 1/3 bleach solution completely obliterated this ink off the paper in only 30 seconds. If you did use the 1/3 bleach solution to get this out of your pen, just make sure that you immediately flush your pen with water so that you don't rust any metal bits. I test ink viscosity or flow by using a tilt test, and I've linked that video and put that in here for you. Now, for the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Krishna's Winter Night has a viscosity of 3.8, making this a very dry ink. But it's also quite dense, so it doesn't need as much of it going down on the paper. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average those, and what I found is the average dry time is 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Krishna's Writer's Night has an average dry time of 15 seconds, making it normal. Considering how dry, or I'm going to call it thick because there's so much stuff in it, this ink is, having a normal dry time is pretty impressive. Instead of finding inks that look like Krishna's Writer's Night, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, I needed something that went as well with the blues we see and as the purpley bits we see. I chose Birmingham Pen Company's Gene Kelly Raspberry Rain. The second writing sample is done on yellow Rhodia, the hazel notebook, and Strathmore writing paper. I really use the yellow paper to see how that yellow tone can affect the color of this ink. Now, this was what primarily comes across as a very blue with purpley tones, but when we compare it to the white Rhodia, we see that these blues become much more purples given this yellow background, which it's very interesting to see. It just means that this particular ink is a little less opaque. It's got some translucency through it, letting that yellow affect its color. But when it was really thick, like on the medium scrubby, there's not a difference between these two. So if you have a gusher of a pen, it might not make a difference. But if you like this kind of purple that we're getting on the yellow, then a medium or dry flow pen might be perfect. Now, hazel paper has no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shading at all. The extra fine has the same tone as the 1.1. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 5 seconds to dry. The medium is significantly darker, so with a broader, wetter pen, we get more of that purpley tone coming through. It looks more blue when it comes down a little drier. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 8 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows no color variation. We didn't expect it, and we didn't get it. Strathmore calligraphy paper. Now, that's not a bleed spot. That's, again, my transfer. But no bleeding, no ghosting, which is nice. Their writing paper doesn't do as well as I would have expected. I had high expectations for their calligraphy paper. The 1.1, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade. That 1.1 looks really narrow here, which is quite interesting to me because normally we look at where spread occurs, but it looks narrow for a 1.1. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub. No feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade, 7 seconds to dry. The medium is significantly darker than the extra fine or the 1.1. No feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade, 10 seconds to dry. They do look very blue, more blue than purple here. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't expect it and we didn't get it. And that is it for the writing samples. So what do I think of Krishna's Writer's Night? Well, the swab shows some sheen that I don't get in the writing. Trust, man. But we do get some really neat purple tones that show up in the writing sample that are quite cool. So what pen is going to give you the best writing experience with this ink? A dry pen is going to give you some very nice shading, and a wet pen is going to put enough ink down to give you just a hint of some of those purple tones. So it's up to you in what you prefer. If you've enjoyed this video and made it this far, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. And if you didn't like it, give me a thumbs down and tell me why. Thanks for watching.